little bit about our museum in general and our plans and construction that we have going on. I know some of you may be familiar, some not, but I'll try to leave everybody somewhat familiar by the time I leave. Well, Everett DeGollier Jr., before his family moved here to Dallas, where I'm not sure which direction from here, but was raised right over here, growing up in New Jersey, in Montclair, New Jersey. You're in the Northeast Corridor, which for a young boy, like I guess any of us, I really didn't have much of a interest in trains, really. I don't tell anybody that I meet at work because they might stone me, but I was more interested in aircraft because that's what my grandfather did during the Second World War. So, but any young man's interested in, I guess, machines and things like that. On the East Coast, between all these major cities there in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, you had a lot of railroad activity, which young Everett was interested in. And I read that sometimes he occasionally, accompanied a senior to the station where he would commute to work every day just so he could get a chance, to see all the hustle and bustle. Today, I think it's the airport equivalent, is what the train stations used to be like, and in a way on the East Coast still are today. And in 1936, he read a magazine which was called Railroad Stories, which is the precursor to Railroad Magazine, which I'm vaguely familiar with because we have some in our museum's collection. But for those interested in railroading, it was kind of the go-to subject matter. And young Everett was just fascinated with all these photos of the different passenger cars, freight cars, locomotives that he saw in this magazine when he first read it in 1936. And it really began a lifelong hobby of railroad photography and reading about the railroad, and really just sparked an interest that would stay with him the rest of his life. And these interests really took him worldwide. And from what I've read, he gathered books from different countries that he traveled to, and even in different languages. And some, he said, were easier to read than others. But so he did have some foreign language skills. And as he traveled, he collected over 11,000 books on or pamphlets on railroads globally, and also his photography love. He ended up with nearly 80,000 negatives and 150,000 photographic prints in his collection, and evidently a model too, right there on his desk. So, and I'm sure I got my clicker on here. There we go. And today, some of you are probably familiar just with all the knowledge you've learned here, being on the family estate. A lot of his and his father's work ended up in different libraries from Norman, Oklahoma to Austin, Texas, just to here at SMU. And today, a lot of his photos are on the SMU library. And this is a link for Flickr, trying to put two words together, where a good portion of these photos, 798, so there's still 100, I'm not going to try to do that math, 149,500 more to be uploaded online, but a lot of his collection is online on the SMU library, and Flickr has a lot of their digital collections of photos and different documents online. So it's something, if you're interested in railroads or photography, the SMU library collection, and specifically the DeGollier collection, are available online for you to view. And this came from Everett DeGollier Jr. in an interview that I read for a magazine. During World War II, he went to the Wichita Falls and Southern Roundhouse, and I'm guessing, I think he was in school in New Jersey, I'm thinking was home for Christmas break or something along those lines. But during World War II, everybody was always, looking for suspicious activity. And here's this young man out there with a camera taking pictures of the roundhouse, where they can be storing engines that are moving war supplies across the country. So diligent. So hopefully you would do, spotting suspicious behavior, report somebody's license plate number, call the FBI, and DeGollier Sr., just right out here, got a phone call at the house. And he was like, well, that's just my son. F. Jr., be glad he's not here because he would bore you with all of his tales of doing photography. So they had a little fun with it, but he was reported to the FBI. And, you know, today, I guess post 9/11, they do take a lot of those security measures around rail installations and anything pretty seriously. But I found it pretty humorous that DeGolyer and his father had a good laugh about it at the time. But as we continue, you know, into his, you know, young adulthood and adulthood, you know, it was always a serious, you know, hobby and interest of his. And by the 1960s, his passion saw him become a founding member and president of the Southwest Railroad Historical Society, which was mainly an academic group that was formed to produce, or I should say publish, books on railroad history. In this photo here, Iron Horses of the Santa Fe Trail, in a way, was, you know, the seminal work of the group. And, you know, if you're really interested in that particular subject, my boss, who's, you know, been in this line of work further than me, you know, says it's the Bible for that subject matter. And it was a book that he and others worked on there as part of the Southwest Railroad Historical Society. Oops, there we go. And now we'll kind of move up just a few years, but still in the early 1960s. And in 1963, the State Fair of Texas was working on a new exhibit called the Age of Steam exhibit, which was going to be a part of the exhibit, or I should say the museum. I used to say museum. The fair's theme that year was Our American Heritage. And the railroad played a major, you know, piece here locally in Dallas. The Houston and Texas Central Railroad from Galveston to Dallas met the Missouri-Kansas-Texas Railroad, and then the Texas and Pacific Railroad from basically Shreveport on the border to El Paso in the 1870s formed the first east-west, north-south intersection in the state of Texas, which actually made Dallas grow the way it was. It was for a while the largest city that was not, you know, on a navigable body of water, debating the Trinity River beating that status. I don't think really any boats could make it up and down, but it was integral to, you know, Texas history, the railroading. And Joseph Rucker Jr. on the left, he was vice president of the State Fair of Texas, leading up this exhibit. And in 1963, this is actually a photo from DeGolyer Jr. It's an engine that I guess us at work call the 7 spot, but officially Dallas Union Terminal number 7. It was a steam engine that worked here at the big station, Union Terminal here in downtown Dallas, from 1923 to 1963, and was actually like the last operational, you know, revenue-making steam engine in service in the state of Texas. And at this time, it was going to be retired and was kind of put back in the roundhouse for new, fancier, you know, diesel-electric technology. And the Southwest Railroad Historical Society and Everett DeGolyer Jr. had an interest in preserving this, you know, last operating steam engine in the state of Texas, which just happened to coincide when the State Fair is working on this exhibit, where they're trying to get a, you know, couple of engines and make a train-themed exhibit. So backing up, that was how Rucker and DeGolyer met and really started a good 10-year partnership where DeGolyer, representing the Southwest Railroad Historical Society, and Joseph Rucker, representing the State Fair of Texas, that really began, you know, our museum here in 1963. And this picture was taken by DeGolyer Jr. on May 30th, 1963, as it made its way from Union Station to the State Fair, the last time it ever operated. So it's a pretty neat picture, and from what I read, DeGolyer Jr. thought, or I guess kind of reminisced in this article I read, where it's like, I used to take pictures of this and watch it downtown working at the station, and, you know, never knew, you know, 30 years later that he was going to be a part of its, you know, preservation. And it's still here in Frisco, Texas in our museum's collection today. And we had a Boy Scout project where they redid the cab of it. So it looks a lot nicer than another engine we have where, you know, that metal just rusts out over time. So I always like to refer, when we talk about this at work, you know, as our founding piece of the museum, thanks to DeGolyer Jr. and Rucker Jr. and everybody there who was involved. and its preservation. And for the next decade, Rucker and DeGolyer again formed a really good partnership. And I guess, this time period too, the 1960s, is really the end of passenger travel in the United States because of the automobile post-World War II and Eisenhower and the interstate system all the way to your local city roads. The boys are back home after Depression and war. The automobile, which is becoming a thing in the 20s, has about a 15-year pause from 29 to 46. And then the jet age really takes over, so the railroads were just starting to retire a lot of their passenger cars, scrap their old steam engines they weren't working on, which is the time that DeGolyer and Rucker were really starting to get this organization going. I can't call it really a museum yet because it was an annual exhibit at the state fair. So kind of what I want to do here for the next few minutes is give a kind of a virtual tour through the slideshow here of some of the key pieces that DeGolyer was a part of during his era involved with our organization when it was the Age of Steam exhibit at the state fair. And the two really kind of had somewhat of, kind of a working relationship of greater plans for the museum, but they were just really collecting at this point, and I'll probably get to our museum plans here at the end. But the first locomotive, oops, went ahead my slide. This is a Baldwin-built locomotive in 1942 that ran on the Frisco Railroad that the Frisco, Texas is named for, which is always a cool piece. I get to talk about our local town history that I've learned since I moved there. And it's also an interesting story for this locomotive. I like to call it a war baby. Our country has never faced anything like World War II and rationing really since then, and the Great Depression. Steel was a very valuable commodity, diesel engines for tanks and boats. And the Frisco Railroad wanted a larger engine. This is about an 850,000 pound, locomotive, and it's probably 100 feet or so long. It's really big, and the Frisco wanted bigger engines that could do the job of two engines, but it could do it singularly by itself. And the War Production Board said, you can build some new equipment, but it has to be an existing model, that's on the market. And this was one of the big acquisitions that he helped make in 1964. And this engine only ran from 1942 to 1952, which is a very short lifespan. But 1952, the Frisco Railroad said, no more steam engines, we're all going, diesel electric technology, which is much cheaper to operate. So if World War II had probably never happened for us, this engine may have never been built. And it's an engine that DeGolyer was a part of collecting for our organization. And a very historical car here. You can see the National Historic Mechanical Engineering Landmark sign. As you know, with the house here, it's a National Historic Landmark on the Register of Historic Places. And why this car is important, the 1830s to the 1907, all of your cars were made out of wood, which was in a very good combination with a wreck for personal safety. And going back to 1907, they first started building steel body cars, which they called heavyweights because they were much heavier than their wooden counterparts. And Glengyle, that we have in our museum collection, was acquired also in 1964 because, these passenger cars, again, Pullman is retiring all their cars and going out of business because nobody's riding the train. And lo and behold, little did they probably know when they acquired it that eventually it would actually be known as the oldest surviving all-steel compartmented sleeping car left in the world. And there were probably some older than it that may have still been around at this time, but they got scrapped a few years later and didn't end up in a growing collection here in Dallas, Texas. And an interesting note about this too, in 1945, as Franklin Roosevelt's body made its way from Georgia up to New York, this car was actually added the closer it got to D.C. and New York to take him to Hyde Park for final resting. This was a part of Franklin Delano Roosevelt's funeral train. So it has that connection to that event too, though from everything we know, it was probably just press that was being added on to it by the time it got back to D.C., because it was on the Atlantic Coastline Railroad, so it was easy for the railroad to add an extra car for all the mourners and extra press on Franklin Roosevelt's funeral train. And this car, maybe one of our neater stories, the Missouri, Kansas, Texas Railroad ran a train called the Texas Special along with the Katy Railroad from San Antonio to Kansas City. They were actually pretty close to this anniversary. It was July 26, 1964 was the last meal ever served in this car. And speaking of Denison, Texas earlier, the Missouri, Kansas, Texas Railroad, who Eisenhower's father worked for, had a big roundhouse and shop area there in that city because they were the first railroad into Texas from the outside. And this car, along with a lot of other of the Katy's equipment, was just in the roundhouse, basically awaiting scrap. And they had a scrap auction, so the Southwest Railroad Historical Society decided to go up there and see what could be preserved. And this car in 1964 was purchased for $1,500. Basically, the value of scrap metal. And I recognized this name on the wall outside the Arboretum, the Meadows Foundation. In 1990, they provided $54,000 of a $66,000 project to actually cosmetically restore this car on the outside and inside. We haven't had a chance to do it this much since we moved to Frisco because we have a long way to go in our project, but it had the kitchen in the back right here and then 36 seats. The kitchen no longer is functional, but we have a catering company that actually replicates old recipes from different railroads. It used to do Mother's Day, Father's Day, Valentine's Day. We've had some, fundraisers, dining here. It's very limited, but we have basically a big power cord attached to it, so we can plug it in. Since eventually that's how we have to power all this equipment because we're not hooked up and moving the generators or anything. But we're able to run heat and air in this car and lighting, and the caterers just bring the food and assemble it in the kitchen as if they were, still cooking back there. And we've held, actually did Valentine's Day dinner this year for the first time since maybe 2011 at Fair Park, or 2012, which wasn't this picture, this was another event. But we do host meals in here, and really just due to their efforts going up there to buy this car before it got melted down, it's become kind of, in a way, the crown jewel of our passenger car collection. And it also shows you what money can do, too. So I'd like to get out my inflation calculator and see what the 1990s money is today in the late 2010s for how much it cost us. And there's some of the old Missouri, Kansas, Texas blue bottom china that we have on display. This is not a car that's really ever normally open to the public because until we get more construction done, it's at the dead end, so there's no way to get on. There's dining cars, you had to get to them from one car to the other. So we need to get a lot more done, but we have it connected to a couple other cars where it is a part of our school program, or my boss is usually in there, myself, or some of our volunteers. We take the kids in there and tell them what it was like to eat on the train, and we show them a menu from 1937 when this car was, or 1939, 2 years after this car was built. And you tell them to read the price of the meal. It's $1.25 for your salad, appetizer, meal, dessert, drink, all for $1.25, which is about $23 in today's money. I did use the inflation calculator for that because the kids are like, "Wow, what, $1.25 for a full meal?" But it's a great piece that we love to show, especially on our field trips. And probably, really, if you're looking at locomotives, and not to put the Missouri, Kansas, Texas dining car back in line, but for people involved in railroading and locomotives, I think, like I tell a lot of my visitors, everybody, wants to see the biggest, the fastest, the strongest of this, Everybody wants that superlative of whatever field you're studying, the most famous painting from whatever painters on display here at the DMA. And for, I guess, the railroading world, and I had never honestly heard of the big boy steam engine until I learned about it on the job, is the world's largest steam engine. There's a nice little comparison piece from Union Pacific. It's nearly 133 feet, weighs less than 1.2 million pounds, and these were built to cross the Wasatch Mountains between Ogden, Utah, and Green River, Wyoming. And 25 of these were built, and they were on the assembly line at the time of Pearl Harbor. And initially, they were going to be called the Wasatch, but somebody wrote Big Boy on the firebox and a V for victory, and the Big Boy became the thing of legends. And for many of our visitors today, there's only 8 of these left in the world, and we get people who visit internationally because they want to see this locomotive. We have the Gollier Jr. and the Railroad Historical Society and the State Fair of Texas and their collaborative efforts for this locomotive. And for those who just happen to be interested in railroading, none of these have run since 1959, but Union Pacific did rebuild one of them recently and have it up and running. And another car that, moving to the Big Boy, sorry, was 1965, and this next car, 1966, is named Texland. It was a business car for the Fort Worth and Denver Railroad, which operated as part of the Burlington Railroad out of Dallas. And this was a business car, and it's our oldest car, built in 1900. It was originally a wooden-bodied car, and then later, once they got into the steel age, they put a metal body around that old wood, and it has a tarp on it today. It's in pretty rough shape because it's been sitting outside, unfortunately, for over 50 years, but it's our oldest car in the collection. Here's a neat interior piece of kind of the dining area in the middle. All right. And here's one of the Gollier's photos that I found when I was kind of doing a little research for this. I was looking at his photos that were online at the library, and I recognized our car number in the description. It's our Santa Fe parlor car, and it was acquired in 1966. And I think this was probably upon arrival here in Dallas to the State Fair at the Age of Steam exhibit. And there we go. There's an interior picture. And you can't really see it from here, but the back end back here is a bar, and then there's a little smoking section back here. And then today, we walk visitors through it, you see the old ashtrays and cup holders in the car. And this car was going to be scrapped in Cleburne, Texas, where the Santa Fe Railroad had a major shop. But similar to our dining car, and the Gollier and everyone, you know, corresponded with the Santa Fe Railroad. We're like, we'd really love to have this car. And at the time, you know, it was built in 1914. Here it is, the mid-1960s. It was a wooden-bodied car, too, and then had that steel body on the outside. So it had 50 years of wood rot and, you know, rust on the outside. You're like, you don't want to try to keep this together. It's going to be a lot of hard work. And today, it is one of our cars that does need major restoration work. It's starting to show its age from Mother Nature, but one of the really unique cars that the Gollier Company helped acquire to our museum. And here's a very other unique car that I really like that I actually went into for the first time a couple of weeks ago. And it may be hard to see up here, but an old blueprint. This was a lounge car, dormitory car, built in 1926. You actually had a barber shop right here and a shower, and then you had a smoking lounge, and then you had crew quarters here where you could sleep 1, 2, 3, actually right there. You know, 14, 16 people, crew members could sleep in it. And these aren't the Gollier's photos, but are some we have in our collection from the Smithsonian. And I saved them on my computer from my coworker's computer, and you can zoom in on the date here. These were ones that the manufacturer, Pullman, took, you know, after the car was built. And it's a really neat car that does need a lot of restoration work, but it's really unique. It goes back to the 1920s, and it's still, you know, despite the wear and tear, looks almost, like it does in these pictures. But I don't know about getting a straight razor shave on a moving train. Sounds pretty dangerous to me. They didn't have a barber shop on the car. That was a different way I like it. Ladies' lounges, men's lounges on these cars. They really, catered and wanted to pamper, their high-paying customers on these long-distance trips across the country. And here's one more of de Gaulier's photos that I really liked and found in our collection. This is January 1969 upon arrival here in Dallas, Texas. It's a motor car, number 160. And these motor cars were also known, as doodlebugs. They had a funny little nickname because they ran by themselves. And for those who ever visit me or one of my docents on the tour, this is usually the first piece you get to talk to about on a tour because it's nearest our entry and our fence. And kind of as, I try to, keep teaching myself and striving to do better and teach my docents is, these pieces is, hey, this train car, here's all its technical specs, but they tell stories. And, like this engine, for example, was really a product and entered because of the Great Depression here in the United States. Ridership was down, and the railroads in the late 20s were looking to cut their cost. And especially on a lot of their branch lines, and a lot of us might not know, I didn't know this, or if you've ever seen the old movies of the railroads grabbing the mail with those hooks as the train go by, the government and the railroads had a contract until the 1971 to move the mail, and steam engines were as you saw two big ones in these photos, there's a lot of moving parts. Sometimes even 25,000 gallons of water you have to stop and refill every hour and a half, 2 hours at the most. They were time consuming to run. So these motor cars were gasoline electric driven and then later diesel electric driven. And this one was a rail post office doodlebug. And it moved the mail. It ran between San Angelo, Texas to Wichita, Kansas, Amarillo to Clovis, New Mexico. Or if you wanted to go to Carlsbad Caverns National Park, it pulled one passenger car behind it in the 60s before this, I guess, retirement photo when it arrived in Dallas. It pulled a passenger car and you could ride it out to Carlsbad Caverns National Park. And this is a really great photo. De Gaulier had some of the cab and the interior that's actually on the collection online via SMU. And I was like, wow, it actually doesn't look that bad inside compared to what it looks like now. Because today it's full of stuff. It was like a U-Haul for a museum's move from Dallas to Frisco. So it's full of a lot of stuff today. But those were, some of the real key pieces that De Gaulier was really instrumental in. And actually this past weekend I met his son, Everett De Gaulier III. He visited our museum. There was the National Railroad Modeling Association conference here in Frisco, and they had up to 100, maybe 10, 20 people that came out to our museum. He's living in Austin now, and is a member. I don't know if his membership is current, so it's probably, I should mail him another update to renew, but I got to talk to him. I didn't know who it was. My boss was like, here's Lee De Gaulier, John. He gets some stuff straight from the source. So he talked to me a little bit about his father, and what they call, again, the heavyweight cars. He told me a little bit about those, and, him being instrumental in it, riding the railroad companies, letters, and a lot of the railroads too were happy to get rid of it just as long as we could pay the freight to ship it, So he was real instrumental in that. And, my boss never got to know him. He was gone before my boss got involved in the museum, but it's good to know his grandson is still interested. And I may have met him once before, but I know this is probably the first time that I've met him, though I have corresponded with him, sending his membership renewal occasionally. So, I've been about 30 minutes. I just want to kind of finish up with a couple of slides. Our museum is a nonprofit, and we build literally on donations piece by piece. And we built enough track to move these 44 pieces. We didn't talk about all of them, but kind of the ones during that first decade from Dallas to Frisco. And we have a lot more track to build, and we only had 2 acres in Dallas. In Frisco, we've got 14. And as I kind of, hinted at a lot through this stuff has been beat up by the weather. We'll have a roof in the future. And it's kind of everybody that makes it happen. It's a lot of the moving parts and suppliers and partners that provide funding. labor and supplies. And that's kind of the museum's design. The big museum building, parking lot, and all these tracks will turn into a single track at the end, just like at these big train stations. We're basically rebuilding what an late 1800s, early 1900s a railroad station would be. And we're hoping this part that's kind of pink is the remaining track we hope to start working on very soon. The storm drainage that has to go under in this track is about $850,000, and we have enough to get started on it. Maybe not quite complete it, but get most of it done. And really, it's kind of ironic that it's taken, a few years to raise it, but now there's, the construction around this area. As you know, driving to Frisco and back, every corner that's green, sadly, has something being built on it, and the company that needs to get out here, we're just waiting in line. We're next, but waiting in line. So maybe this fall, winter, we'll resume construction. And then, lastly, the exhibit pavilion, where we'll have our main tracks here under a roof that we can start repainting them and doing interior and more exterior restoration to them, and have them protected from the rain and the hail and the sunlight, which does so much damage to this stuff. And we talked about a couple of the different passenger cars, like the Pullman sleeper, the lounge car, the dining car on these tracks. The plan is to build, here's what your pre-World War II passenger train looked like. Here's what your post-World War II train looked like. And just build different period trains out here. Today, we actually do tours and take people out there, but just walking on the tracks in the sun for an hour, it's very rough going. So we're really looking forward to resuming construction, get these tracks in, then get in the walkways, and then start the campaign for the roof. I'm going to go real fast because I don't think I have the video on the laptop. It was on my flash drive. But we do have the model train exhibit. If it's too hot for you, you want to come do something indoors, we have a big model train exhibit. We call it Traintopia. It was a gift of the Sanders family from Dallas. Mr. Sanders died, unfortunately, and upstairs above this massive, 4 or 5 car garage underneath, they had this massive, what they call G-scale, I've never heard of such a thing, model train layout, which is the biggest size model train. And it's a new exhibit that we have, which is open through the summer, Tuesday through Saturday, 10 to 5, Sundays 1 to 5 in the Frisco Discovery Center. So it's a cool weather, indoor, easy walking alternative, which is where we met inside the model train layout. So you can ask him about it, what it was like. Since, unfortunately, I don't have the video on this one, so I don't want to take up any more of your time. I wanted to stick to about 30-35 minutes. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. I know you've got your meeting and stuff to get to.
How in the world did you get trains from Fair Park to Frisco?
That was a lot of work, just getting everything relocated. And before, we really didn't talk about it much, but DeGollier and Rucker were kind of collecting stuff and never really designed a future plan for the museum. And like 50 years later, the collection had got so big that we ran out of room. So we wanted a place where we could put that design you kind of saw in, which required 14 acres. So it had to be somewhere next to the train tracks, number one, because that was the only way to move it. So long story short, Frisco approached us. And number two was Federal Rail Administration we had to work with them, because a lot of this equipment is antiquated, and it's been outlawed is too strong of a word, but isn't up to the modern specifications, and have been essentially outlawed off the tracks since the 1960s, just for newer, safer equipment. And so we had to work with the DG&O Railroad, which goes around here, Dallas, Garland, Northeastern, Union Pacific, Amtrak, TRE, and BNSF. We only had 44 miles of track between Dallas and Frisco that we had to go over, but at 5 different railroads tracks we had to get basically towed on We just basically did enough work on the equipment to make sure it could roll smoothly, got it signed off on by the Federal Rail Administration. In these different railroads, we went around their maintenance, freight, passenger schedules, so it took a long time just to get it moved. But we had to get all that in line before we could even say yes to Frisco, because that was the only way to do it. So we had to be on that planned out first before we moved anywhere, just to be sure we could actually move it. So really good question. A lot of volunteer hours, climbing under these things, getting really dirty. That first big steam engine, I spent a whole day underneath it, working on it. So it was kind of employee hazing my first month on the job.
So are you aware, I'm sure you probably must be aware of the money and what it took to move the vehicle? Which
Yes.
is on its own story.
Yeah, and that got us, you know, really again to Collier and everybody who was riding Union Pacific Railroad and all their collaborative efforts, because today it's one of 8 out of only 25, which was rare to begin with when they were running, but they were made just to go, you know, Utah, Wyoming, Nebraska, Colorado, over the mountains, and it, you know, garnered us, you know, a lot of, you know, national attention. And I'm sure you got to deal sometimes here with, you know, unruly, angry visitors or stuff, but, you know, we had people from across the country who were wanting to come see it move, and it was I don't know about the actual financing, but, you know, the railroad was generous enough to move it for us for free. And we just had to provide all the labor and parts ourselves for basically oiling and lubricating a lot of the parts. I'm not sure, honestly, what that cost. But we were also, as I just mentioned, all these different railroads, we were at their mercy. People just didn't seem to get that. Maybe people calling angry, like, I came all the way from here. I'm like, it says we're going to try to move it on this day. There's no guarantee. But by the time they had to reinforce a bridge, and they were worried because it was so long, you know, bigger than anything that runs today. There's not any turntables around here that long anymore. But they have what was called a Y in Fort Worth, where they kind of had it, you know, facing this direction, backed it up, had it turned around this way. So it took a lot of effort, you know, just to get it out of Dallas, because they're so long that we kind of split the rails, because it's like trying to drive a school bus, like a 2-seat convertible. You're not going to make that curve, you know, like that. So it was really slow going, just getting it out of the sharp curve in Dallas. And then it rolled just fine once we got moving, but it was getting to that point where all the schedules lined up. And it left Dallas so late that it stayed in Irving until the next Sunday. And Sunday was good because the commuter, TRE, Dallas to Fort Worth, doesn't run on Sunday, so they could get it through Union Station, no problem. And they brought it up here. They held all their other traffic for us. It was a great thing that they did. It was like the end of August, like 3 in the afternoon, the worst time of day to be out there. We had tons of people out there for it. The city put up some barricades and some big tents, you know, so people could greet the arrival for it. So it was a lot of, you know, effort and time and money, but luckily the railroads are really good donating a lot of the move cost and are giving us, you know, low cost on a lot of this stuff for moving. Good question.
Do you have documentation on the move for the move?
Yes, we have a lot of it. A lot of people have asked us, you know, if we're going to do like a movie or, you know, video about it or something, which would be pretty neat to do with all the different, you know, news stations that we're covering it and many articles and different things. So it would be nice, because we do have a lot of that. I don't have much of it myself, because that's right when I started. I was kind of thrown right into the middle of it, where they made somebody my size climb under that giant steam engine. In the real world, you'd stand under there like an auto shop and work on it. But all those big wheels had oil reservoirs, and I had to lay under there. And they were probably, you know, I'm just making this up, probably fit that much oil, and I had to put like that much at a time in these little oil jugs they were handing me between the wheels. So it was a lot of work. But yeah, it was really nice to interview a lot of the people involved and compile the stuff that had been filmed and photographs. Ken Fitzgerald, who does a lot of railroad photography, did a lot of great photos. So it would be good to kind of compile it and make something out of it. Somebody over here.
So is the dining party show the one that used to do lots of the dining experiences there at the same
So if you ever did one of those before, that was the one it was. It's kind of hard to tell in the photo from the angles, but it seats, I think, only 18, no. There's 36 tables in there. Some are for 2 people, some are for 4. So.
I had a retirement party for one of my daughters.
Oh wow. Okay, excellent. Do you remember what you ate? Because I've heard the food is good usually if we have that event of working it, so I don't get to enjoy the food. But I've seen the food, and the Spice of Life Catering does a great job replicating all these recipes from the railroads. And yeah, the Valentine's Day was like beef tenderloins and from, I can't remember what railroad, but I think Pennsylvania Railroad strawberry cheesecake or something like that. So it's a really neat experience though.
Docent Meeting.
Yeah. Limit it to the top 36 outlet makers, because that's what I tell people. One, it's just hard to get to until we get really developed and have the infrastructure so it's safe getting in and out of there. We don't have any facilities on the site, so it's really hard to host things now. Right? I can go to the restroom, but you got to go all the way back out to this building next door. But yeah, exactly. So we've done a few for like the mayor and some big fundraisers since we've moved to Dallas, or from Dallas to Frisco. But yeah, it used to do all those dining events going back from the late 1990 after it was restored. All right, any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much for having me.
Just before we let him go, could you tell us your website so people have more information?
I had some extra slides from another talk I gave, but our website is historictrains.org, or we can just type in, Museum of the American Railroad and look it up. Our website, honestly, it is kind of, old and antiquated. We'd like to, redo it sometime and make it a little, easier to navigate. And, oops. Okay. Well, I have it here on my screen. Again, Traintopia, is open Tuesday, Wednesday through Saturday is normal, but we opened up for the summer an extra day. And we do, tours, year round, which is an hour in the elements, walking on the track. But it is really rough, a lot of tripping hazards. But we tell people, we do it year round, when the weather's nicer and cooler, where we do usually maybe go through a couple of old cars, not necessarily the ones I've shown you, but usually try to go through a couple of cars, and I talk to you about these engines and our other engines. But yeah, you can just look up, Museum of the American Railroad, or go to historictrains.org. Cool.
Amazing, the connections, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, we all knew that Everett was, involved and, very interested in the trains. And then, of course, Everett Jr. But then now the connection with him of being with the Eisenhower, it's amazing. You just got to open your mouth and ask questions, and it's amazing what you find out. Well, we have a lot of things going on here. I I want to give you, Jeff couldn't make it today for the treasurer's report, but we have a total of $11,427 in our bank account, but we have an outstanding deposit from DABS for $585.92, which will bring us up to $12,013.62. Our donations for the year, even though we are really, really way down in our attendance of people coming to visit the DeGolyer, we're like almost 50% down from last year. Can't figure out why that is. But our donations are only about $100 less year to date. So whatever you're doing, he said there's a lot of 20s that are coming in there. So keep it up. Guests for the year to date. In June, we had 1,486 guests came through, which is only just a 7% decrease over June of last year, which is good, because up until then, overall, we are down 51% from last year. Last year, we had 17,805. This year, we had 8,675. I think the biggest thing was, you know, we didn't leave Christmas up after the first of the year this year. Because like in January of this year, we only had 604 people come through. In January of last year, we had 1,742. So I think that has a lot to do with it too. Because they're still, you know, they're coming to see all of the Christmas stuff right after New Year's, and we didn't have it, we were shut down. So it's really interesting. March was a big, big difference. March of last year, we had 6,697. This year, we only had 2,600 people.
It rained the whole month of March.
I think the rain, you know, it's interesting too, because I was talking to Jeff, and for June, the busiest day in June was Monday, the 17th, with 87 guests. That's really, really strange. I don't know if when the people were able to come out, that the weather was good and they were out in the garden. Because, you know, we've had rain, like I said, since April. Yes. Before we get any further, and I forget it, make sure that the guests sign in. I know Susan said that she probably missed about 6 people that came in late to her tour last week. So just be sure that if you don't get them to sign in, at least try and do a count of how many it was and ask them, you know, where they were from, and then you can go back and put it in. Because the garden itself is up, so I don't know what's going on. Susan, you want to talk to us about our next program coming up? Betsy?
It's actually our combined outing and team build, and we have the poster out over there. The flyer was sent out about when we were all assembling here, so you will have it in your email. That gives you some more information. If you're uncertain about coming, there's still some time to sign up. What we've decided to do, because of the cost of the venue, is to go ahead and have people who are eligible for the team bill to be reimbursed by the Arboretum to provide $5. And those who are just coming that would normally be able to go to the outing to pay $15 to attend. And that way we've covered our costs, and we may be able to do a little honoring for the Herd Craig home, because they are giving us a tremendous discount to enable us to do all of this inside. We're using 2 of their buildings, and normally those are additional costs. But I'll just give you that much of that, and Betsy can tell you a little bit more about what it's going to be like.
Well, we're going to, I think the email goes out today, or
It's already out.
It's already out, so it'll be in your email when you open all that up. We'll be up there about 10 o'clock. We're going to tour the home, and maybe a little bit of the grounds, and then we're going to have a wonderful ladies' tea, ladies and gentlemen's tea that in the afternoon, and about 11:30 or so. And then, of course, and we don't know quite the details of how we're doing the team build in the morning or in the afternoon, but we will be just sharing a lot of stories with photographs from the house itself and furnishings or details, architectural details that we all may know. So we'll be in the carriage house doing that, and that'll be great because we'll get a real feel for the whole property as well, using all of it. So, and if people do need to carpool, you'll be able to contact Susan if you need carpooling. Otherwise, it really is just straight up 75. We'll provide a map for you how to get there. It's very simple. Yeah, if anyone's been to McKinney, the square. And so we'll meet up there 10 o'clock, maybe a little bit before 10 o'clock, because we'd like to get started pretty early that day. So that's it. Anything, Sharon? Sharp?
Yeah, so if you signed up today, please pick up one of the goodie bags. I went to McKinney's Visitor Center, and they were kind enough to put some things together about McKinney, and a little notepad, and an emery board, and a pen. And the lady from the Visitors Bureau is also going to meet with us that morning, and hopefully she's going to be able to acquire some extra coupons from some of the local vendors up there. That's what she's working on for us. So if you've not ever been up there, it's an amazing little town, and we accidentally found this house. We were at the Herd Museum, which is where he volunteers, and looked at it, and we decided it was just going to be too hot and not really equitable for our group to be there. And one of the ladies said something about, well, you're looking for more stuff. We've got some more history stuff at the Herd Craig Museum in downtown, the historic home. And I went, historic home? What? So I called them and set up an appointment the next day and went up there and looked at it. And it was just jaw-dropping gorgeous. This house was built in 1900. Most of the furnishings are original. There is a bit of they do not have an elevator, and it's a 4-story building, but we only see 2. There isn't an elevator to get to the main floor where we will be, but there is a 2nd story that you would have to walk up the staircase. But don't let that hinder you from coming, because the 1st floor and the carriage house are worth it. The stained glass in there, the woodwork, it's just gorgeous. The china, it's like I said, it's mind-boggling. So be sure and sign up. Tell all the docents that you are teamed with that missed the program today, that they missed an exciting program, and to be sure and sign up. By July 19th, we need to get a feel for how many people are going so we can let them know, because they cater this, and it's a beautiful setting. So